You going live?
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome to Through a Scottish Prism. I hope you and yours are well. We are live today, we're going out live, and so, as they used to say, and that was at Thunderbirds, anything could happen in the next half hour. Actually, our first ever live broadcast was in May 21. It was a one-off. It was to announce the election results for the Holyrood 2021. Here we are, 4.5 or 4.75 years later, and we're doing another live show. Now, we'll see how this goes. It's an experiment because a lot of our viewers, and it shows, unlike the politicians, we actually listened to our viewers who said it would be good if we tried this so they could interact better. So we're going to give it a whirl and let's see what happens. So, good morning, gang. As you can see, we're all here. I'd like to start, if I may. Techie, could you stick up the first picture of the polling that came out this week for the UK? There we go. And it's showing there very much that Reform are on landslide territory, guys. Greens miraculously are in second place. And as that guy used to say on television, it's only a poll, it's only a poll. But there we are. And Labour languishing down in 16, as are the Tories. The Liberal Democrats, the dizzy heights of 12. And the others include DUP, SNP, Plaid Cymru, etc. at 7, which is quite high, actually. Anything over 5 is interesting. So, Phil, these opinion polls, as I say, it is only an opinion poll, it's only one. But the Greens, you would never have thought it would be possible in any opinion poll, let alone anything else. It shows that people are actually fed up with the normal parties.
Yes, and Reform will win, quite clearly. Reform is going to win here. And therefore, because England decides what politics and therefore policies get imposed upon the Scots. We don't get a say, and Reform are working the vote for us, we will bring change to politics strategy. When, of course, Farage and the rest of these are just lying. It's really just the uber right under a new name and pretending that there will be change. It will instead be even more right-wing, with even less rights for the people, more austerity, and further acceleration of the wealth gap, with more for the billionaires, corporations, and less for the people. Also, they're using the anti-immigrant story, and I'm certain this has been created as a vehicle to allow the corporations who really control the West, UK, US, and the EU, to gain complete control over us. Your civil rights are being eroded and will continue to be eroded. The right to protest is already curtailed. Freedom of speech is rapidly disappearing, and the cost of living will continue to increase while your earnings will continue to decrease in real terms. So people quite rightly have legitimate concerns over immigration, as we need strong rules over who's allowed to come and go into your country, Scotland in our case, and we need to enforce them. The problem is in times of decline in the UK, as we see today, when the traditional parties, having deconstructed from within as they sought to appease the corporations through lobbyists, making yet more money for the rich and themselves at the expense of the people, this continuation of the asset stripping of the state creates a toxic political atmosphere, and what you get is the rise of the extreme right and the extreme left. So yes, Reform's going to win this. Real politics is biting hard, and we're moving to the extreme sides of the spectrum, be it right or left. And I would say, if you want to understand this better, read Wings of Scotland's Over Scotland article, The Music That Nobody Likes, posted on October 24th. It's where the Orwellian doctrine is very well explained. In short, people continue to be lied to politicians, media, institutions, and powers that be. And this is just as true in Scotland. Even though the majority of Scots still believe in independence, many voters still believe the SNP represents the independence movement. And anyone who doesn't see that's in a bubble, unaware that the leadership of the SNP have actually sold out the people of Scotland and are instead just self-serving devolutionists. So instead, the extreme left has taken a foothold in SNP, destroying their credibility, Gender Recognition Act being the case in point. And those of us who spend the time researching and looking into this know, and this we're talking about Liberate Scotland, ALBA, Salvo, Independence for Independence, SSRG. The only reason the SNP vote remains as high as it does is that most folk don't spend much time investigating what's actually going on in politics and therefore don't see what the SNP has become. And the more people that become aware or are made aware of SNP's betrayal and the truth about reform, then the closer we will get to independence. And if I cannot understand for 1 minute why any woman in Scotland or anyone that cares about women's rights would vote for the SNP, given the Gender Recognition Act and their continued support. Aye, so we're in trouble politically. Keep at it, peeps.
You're on mute, Roddy.
I do that, folks, just to let you know, anything can go wrong, will go wrong. My router failed yesterday, and I'm actually in a different location beside a main railway line between Barcelona and Tarragona. So I'm muting when the trains go past. We're getting some feedback here, Phil. I think you might have a second device on, Phil. So here's the techie. Can you stick up that? Greens are about to win 47 seats. I know it's only a poll, Alan, but it's 47 seats is the possibility. And this is the listing of them all. None of them in Scotland, I hasten to add. They're all south of the border. But isn't this the same as when people were screaming at the end of the Tory, get rid of the Tories, get rid of the Tories, and they all switched over to Labour. Labour's got a huge majority, and people are going, oh, no, that doesn't work either. Now they're going for reform and they're going for the Greens. The same disappointment awaits them, Alan. Now you're on mute.
Let's call it for what it is. It's desperation dressed up as rebellion. People are so desperate to try and get rid of one party that they'll vote for any other party that they think's got a chance to take over. But it's embarrassing this way the system is. I mean, it's so poor that people are now thinking the only option they have is staying at home. They're not going to go out and vote, which is the worst thing that you can do, because that allows these people a free range. They could do whatever they want, because the only power you have is with your vote. And it's time that the political party system was bust once and for all, because the parties do not represent the people. The parties represent themselves and their wealthy donors. And that is the biggest problem, not just here in Scotland or in England, but right throughout the world. We're seeing these small parties, these corrupt parties taking control and changing the laws to keep the people down. And when that doesn't work, they then bring in the wars to try and deflect your attention elsewhere and put you in a state of fear. They also, and this is one of the biggest problems that we have, is we have governments who are pretending to be left-wing governments, bringing in neoliberal policies, which then allows the left wing and the right wing to come in and destroy them. So as they get a takeover of the government, because people are so desperate to get rid of the neoliberals that are in power, they bring in the right wing. It's like bringing back the ghost of Thatcher on steroids. People have got to remember, at this present time, we've got the wars going on just now, the support of genocide, and we also have the blame of immigrants to this country. Now, think very hard. When did the problems of this country start? Because before all these asylum seekers come to this country, we had problems with our benefit system. We had problems with our NHS system. We had problems getting appointments with our GPs. We had problems with every single services that we get through councils, including homelessness. They were all here before asylum seekers came. The problem that we have is governments and local councils not doing the job they are elected to do. So they transfer the blame over to other people. Now, I totally agree that we need an asylum system that works for us, so we can make sure the criminals aren't coming to this country. And what you do there is you make it quite clear to them that if you come in here to our country into a safe haven, you're welcome. But you must accept our culture, and you must accept our laws. If you cannot do that, then you'll be on the next boat or plane back to where you come from. When we go to other people's countries, we respect their beliefs. We respect their laws. So we just expect that back here again. But it is not all asylum seekers who are criminals. Many of them are fleeing countries that we are assisting bombing them out of. And for reform, they keep saying they want to stop boats, yet their biggest funder is from the arms trade, who is paying and supplying bombs that are causing the boat people. They are causing people to flee their own country because it works in reform's favour to instill that fear amongst the population. Because that way they're not looking at what else reform are talking about. They're not looking at what reform is doing, because reform are talking about removing your NHS, removing your pension, removing your social care. That's what reform's hiding from people. And when people realise that, they will not be climbing in the polls. And neither will the Greens, because the Greens in England aren't exactly what they're saying they are. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes with the Greens. So people have to be really careful how they vote. Don't vote out of anger of one party. Vote for a party who will deliver real change. And in Scotland, that party is Liberate Scotland.
Well said. Techie, could you stick up? There's one seat they're going to take, but going with this poll, and that would be down in Holborn in London. The seat of the Prime Minister would fall to the Greens if there's an election, as you say, held tomorrow. But it is quite amazing how far Labour have fallen through the floor.
Well, I understand that the result for them in this poll is the lowest that they've ever polled at any time since polling began. And the Greens are probably polling the highest that they've ever polled. And Nigel Farage looks like he would actually be the next Prime Minister of Great Britain. Now, what I'm really troubled about, though, is people are taking their eye off the ball in Scotland if they're talking about the rise of reform, because the eye in Scotland should be very much on the question of a positive future for Scotland. Reform are not a positive, forward-looking progressive party, much though I hate the word progressive at the best of times. But what Scotland needs is to be able to govern itself. That poll shows you, and I think it was possibly Greg MacArthur that said in the chat there, that poll just displays that Scottish MPs will never have any influence in Westminster because we're too wee to have any influence, because we only have a handful of MPs in Westminster. And that's why there is no point in relying on Westminster to treat Scotland either with a modicum of democracy or respect. It's why, and I'm sure we'll come on to it later, there is no point in the begging mentality looking for another referendum. But again, Duncan McKerricher in the comments had said the only reform Scotland needs is independence. Bang on the money. That's exactly what Scotland needs, because reform are offering a very bleak outlook for the whole of the United Kingdom. But Scotland, no matter who is in power in Westminster, Scotland will continue to be the cash cow. It is Scotland's resources that fund Westminster. It's Scottish resources that keep Westminster functioning. And the sooner that the Scots realise that, the better. But at the moment, what needs to be addressed in Scotland is, as Phil said, people have to be educated and they have to rely on politicians being honest about what the future for Scotland could hold. And the future for Scotland ought to be as a prosperous, independent country. And we can do that when we elect MSPs next year who are absolutely focused, foursquare on regaining independence, not there for self-interest, not there as gravy trainers, but there to do one job and one job alone, independence, nothing less, because that can happen next year. But if it doesn't happen next year, Scotland will be at the mercy of a government which for now looks like it may very well be led by the worst thing to ever happen in British politics, namely Nigel Farage. So come on, folks, if you support independence, you don't just have to support Liberate Scotland, although that would be most welcome. What you need to do is you need to get out, get active, agitate, talk to your friends, talk to your colleagues at work, talk to folk at the checkout in Aldi's and Lidl's, speak to them about the benefits of independence. Understand why it is that we complain about energy prices that are unnecessarily high in a land of energy plenty. Explain to people why it is that food prices are going through the roof as the result of Brexit and related policies, and point out that if Scotland ran her own affairs by herself, we'd order our own priorities, which would exclude weapons of mass destruction on the Clyde, but we would be an inclusive society because we would have a positive, forward-looking outlook. That's what Scotland needs.
Absolutely, it does. Here, there's a great comment here from one of our watchers here. If it comes up there, no, that's not the one that's jumped. Now, you have to excuse us, folks, for these little blips, but it was from Kieran, who said that a danger to Scotland is Farage, because he's threatened to cut the budget, close down Holyrood, close down the Senate, close down Stormington of direct rule. That is the truth, isn't it? And it is I think it would be the biggest mistake they could make, but it is a possibility, Lloyd.
Yes, it is, but let's be straightforwardly honest about this. That opinion poll that we just saw is an opinion poll about England, and it's about the divide in English politics. And the clearest sign of that is the final column in that opinion poll is called Others, and the others are the Democratic Unionist Party of Northern Ireland, the SDLP from Northern Ireland, the Alliance Party from Northern Ireland, Sinn Féin from Northern Ireland, the Scottish National Party here in Scotland, the Alapa Party, Liberate Scotland, from Wales, Plaid Cymru and Propel Wales. So all of the others in that opinion poll represent the countries that make up the United Kingdom, but the bulk is about England and England only. And what that poll says to me is England is at the moment having a crisis of its own nationalism. Reform is an English nationalist party and a very right-wing, very pro-capitalist English nationalist party. Its whole basis and ethos is the protection of England, and it draws together into its support people who take the imperialist English attitude towards the rest of the countries of this so-called United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Now, to me, apart from the fact that we're 4 years away from an election, let's not get our knickers too much in a twist, because we have the opportunity, as Eva has said, and as Phil has said, and as Alan has said, at next year's election, to change the political landscape. And the only change in the landscape we need is for Scotland to become an independent country at the earliest possible opportunity. And that opportunity exists next May. We should not be worrying about the potential of a UK government run by Nigel Farage and Richard Tice and Reform, because we're not going to be here. And this needs now to be the focus of all the Scottish-focused political parties, that we do not allow ourselves to get into this nonsense discussion about how we have to fight reform. We have to fight. Why do we have to fight reform? How many, reform is not of any real importance in Scotland. What we need to fight at the moment is apathy. Absolute apathy amongst the voting public. That is the challenge to all political parties in Scotland, but more specifically those that are focused on the needs and the wishes of the Scottish people. We need to be moving to a situation where people want to go out and vote, not out of the fear of reform, but out of the belief in a positive future for Scotland and for our future generations. That's the real challenge here. The challenge here is not to challenge reform, challenge Farage, challenge the English right. There's no requirement for that. The exit door is open for us in May of next year, if we choose to take it. Now, what I don't want to hear is Scottish politicians, particularly those who represent British parties, namely the Liberal Democrats, the Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, and the Labour Unionist Party, complaining, moaning and howling about the potential for a reform government. That's of no interest to us and should be of no interest to us. What we should be concerned about is, will we still be part of the Union when the next Westminster general election comes around? Because the greatest curse on our country is being part of the British Union. What is it that takes away all the energy riches that we have to feed into the Westminster system while leaving us with the highest bills in the whole of Europe? £200 billion is extracted from Scotland each and every year to prop up the United Kingdom. We need to start thinking in terms of how we make use of that £200 billion per year to improve the lives of the people of this country, and how Scotland can make a positive contribution in the world. I mean, frankly, I am sick to the back teeth of being dragged into what is effectively an English political fight. I said this about the last general election, where the Labour Party were returned with a huge majority on 32% of the vote. You know, you look at that opinion poll where, you know, the Reform are in the lead, the Greens are behind, but there's no indication whatsoever of what the turnout would be. That turnout, you know, if the turnout's 32%, how can you possibly say that anyone has a massive majority? Nobody has a massive majority if 60% of the people haven't voted for you. These are the realities that we need to start addressing. And we need to stay out of what is an English factional fight over whether England wants to be controlled from the right or from the left. And I would suggest this. Everyone says, oh, it's a good thing the Greens are in second. It's not a good thing for women and girls. The Green Party of England and Wales is even more radical on the issue of gender recognition and self-identity than the Green Party in Scotland is. But they hide it. The other thing that I would suggest to people is, why is it that the Greens are suddenly rising in the polls? When Caroline Lucas was leader of the English Green Party, she periodically got on the telly. But since this boy Zach has appeared from absolutely nowhere, the man with 3 names, he's never off the television. And I would suggest that this is, to some degree, Reform and the Greens topping this opinion poll, appearing that they are going to win this election, which is, as I said, 4 years down the line, that this is interference. Interference by the media, interference by the powers that be, to create trouble for the Labour Party, the Tory Party and the Liberal Democrats in England. We need to stop seeing our politics through the prism of English politics and get back to doing what we're all doing now, which is seeing it through a Scottish prism. We have the opportunity next year to create a circumstance which would take us away entirely from the threat of having a reform government, or indeed what I believe would be an equally as unfortunate circumstance would be a British government run by Zach Polanski. Because all we would be getting there is the equivalent of a Scottish government run by Ross Greer. So let's get real, people. The main battle in Scotland at the moment is the battle against apathy. The main battle is to get people out to vote and get them out to vote for a positive future. And the only positive future we have is as an independent country. So we need to get the message out and get that message clear to people. Independence, nothing less. Independence, nothing more. Next May.
Well, I don't know what I missed there. Well said. I can see everyone applauding, so it must have been good. I apologise, folks. My laptop decided to crash. Everything that could go wrong does go wrong. Murphy's Law.
It let me blab on, though, didn't it?
It did. Well, perhaps it did, but hey, I'm back now. They probably preferred it with me not here. I've got my place back. But could we, Techie, could you stick up? We also got another poll this week, Phil, and that was on independence. And it's up 3 points at 55%. So even though, there is showing a lot of apathy at the actual ballot box and to get out and campaign and work, when people are asked the question, a vast majority of the people living in Scotland desire independence.
Yes, and it's wonderful to see, and comes from the Ipsos website. So, quoting directly from the Ipsos website. So, this is the Scottish Political Monitor running partnership with the STV. Finds support for Indy has risen by 6 points from the last poll they did in May. Now, among those with voting intention and very likely to vote, 56% say they would vote yes in an immediate referendum, while 44% say they would vote no. Switch around. It's a switch around from what we saw last time. The SNP remain the dominant party in Scotland. 51% of those likely to vote say they would vote for them in an immediate general election. Labour remain in second on vote share at 25%, Cons down 13%. Reform not really featuring massively, as has been discussed before. So treating the next election as a de facto referendum on independence appears unlikely to dent the SNP's vote share. Indeed, 53% of those likely to vote say they would vote SNP in this situation, with a further 2% saying they would vote for the Scottish Greens. This would take the vote share for pro-independence parties to 55% if SNP and the Scottish Greens were truly independent parties, which neither of them are, sadly. However, the trust in the SNP to tackle a range of issues facing Scotland has fallen in the last 18 months. Well, actually, in the last 11 years since Nicola took over. Trust in the party to manage the NHS has fallen 18% since April 21, and healthcare NHS is the top issue that the public see facing Scotland. So the SNP are really not listening, and they're not doing a very good job. So SNP see this and know this. Even Ipsos report that if SNP hold a de facto plebiscite election, then Scotland will vote for it now. And that's without a campaign. So the obvious question is, why are SNP 1, not unifying the independence movement, 2, not calling for a plebiscite election, and still instead continue with SNP 1 and 2, which of course lets the unionist vote and representation in on the list and thereby blocks independence? There's only one answer to that. Clearly, the SNP know they were gifted the keys to an independent Scotland by Alex Salmond when he handed them to Nicola, and they will not use them. They have singularly failed to advance the cause of independence since Nicola took over, and they would rather continue their reign of power in Scotland with all the financial rewards and ego boosts these so-called positions of power bring than end the suffering of Scots, 1 in 4 of whom are in poverty, and failing to do what they're regularly been voted in to do, SNP, which is to free the Scottish people in this union of unequals. Just think about it. We have to persuade Scots to damage SNP further at the elections in May 2026. And we do this by voting Liberate Scotland candidates who stand against the SNP. And for any independence party on the list, that obviously don't include SNP or the Greens, because they are not doing what they said they would do, make Scotland free. It's not difficult. We need to show those still voting SNP the truth. They're not taking us to independence. And why any woman, indeed any person who values the rights of women and girls in safe spaces would vote for SNP when they still defy the law, promote the woke destruction of safe spaces such as female-only changing rooms for women and girls, and cannot even define what a woman is. Incidentally, we all know it's an adult human female. So, to hell with them. We need to change. We need to open eyes and get independence, nothing less. Roddy, are you on mute?
One of our regulars, John McGrorty, and a good guy all round, puts this comment. He's absolutely right, and Alan. And these are the polls without campaigning. There's been no SNP or independence campaign since 2014. Imagine where we would be if we were to actually campaign for it.
Yeah, and because of that, this is not just a poll bump. This is the heartbeat of a nation that's making it quite clear that we want independence. That is our sovereign will. And that's, like John said, that's with the media blackout, SNP meltdown, Westminster lies. The support of independence is still rising, and that is important. But what the polls also says, like Phil said, 51% say they would vote SNP. That's if they come out and vote. Because the problem we have is these people are not coming out to vote.
Mm.
And the other problem we have is if they come out and vote for the SNP, they will be voting to remain in a devolved parliament in Holyrood. The only way you could vote in 2026 to get independence is for Liberate Scotland. We need people in there who will create fireworks in that parliament and make sure the politicians are doing what they were elected to do, and that is to break up this union. Now, to answer a question that was on the chat from John B. Hall, the reason we say liberate Scotland rather than independent Scotland is because we have to make our country free, not just from England, but of the English establishment. And the answer to the question about the nanny state is an independent Scotland will be free to put forward a written constitution safeguarding the rights of every single citizen and taking them out of the hands of elected politicians. So their ideology cannot interfere with our rights as citizens of this country. So yes, we have to liberate ourselves not just from the English state, but from the English system. And we have to give protection to every single citizen. But the sovereign will of the people is settled. They want independence. What they have to do now is to have the courage of their convictions and actually vote for it. Because the unsettled will is sitting in Bute House and in Westminster on the SNP benches. Those people will not, and they have been proven not to be able to deliver independence. We need to change who we have representing us. We need people in there with backbones that will fight. They will not be seeking permission. They will not be begging Westminster. They will be telling Westminster, we are an independent nation. Now get around the negotiating tables, or we go to the United Nations and we do it through international law.
Okay, I'm well said. Here's a techie. Can you stick up? We've got 55 for independence, Eva. We've got the SNP ahead in the Holyrood, but the Reform moving into second position in Scotland in the Holyrood election. But the man, could you put in the one with Anas Sarwar for me, techie? There we go. He's in denial. He's still seen himself as First Minister. They're languishing in 16% in the polls. But he's still, and they're still doing their favourite, isn't it? SNP bad. That's all they've got.
We've been here before many times with Wendy Alexander, Kezia Dugdale, Richard Leonard, you name it. The people of Scotland don't buy it anymore. It's over Labour. The people of Scotland are understanding that Labour are a unionist party. There is no such entity as the Scottish Labour Party. It doesn't exist. What we need to be doing is we need to have a positive campaign for independence. You know, although we all loved the 2014 campaign, despite the heartbreak that it brought, the 2011 campaign was highly, highly positive, very, very motivated, because Alex Salmond had led a competent government for 4 years, and he gave people a vision of what Scotland could be like were we an independent country, and that's what contributed very, very much to the outcome in 2011, and the majority that itself then meant that we were entitled to demand that referendum. So it's that positive campaign that we need to have, where we're talking Scotland up, not down, where we are able to do what Alec did, which was make us walk tall and feel that we were no better than anybody else, but we were no worse. We were equals on the world stage, and that's what we should be aiming for, because that's what we are. We are a resourceful people. We're enormous potential. Look at what we've given the world already. So I don't want to hear guff from Anas Sarwar, or indeed from John Swinney, or from the leaders of any of the other parties in Scotland about difficulties that there are in Scotland. I want to hear constructive responses and constructive arguments as to how best we address all the economic ills of our country and how we deal with all of our other difficulties. And the only answer, and you can go round the doors about this forever, the only answer is independence, because unless and until we have independence, Scotland's priorities will not be met by Westminster. Westminster will prioritise Westminster's priorities and the priorities of the people of England. That is what the Labour Party will do too, because the Labour Party is, again, Unionist Party and their priorities, their needs, their interests lie very much in Westminster and in maintaining the union. We need to break that union down, and we need to be able to say to people, not just here's the facts and the figures about what we can do when we are an independent country, but we have to be able to sell a credible route to independence. And the credible route to independence is the key. It's Holyrood 2026 as a plebiscite. Everybody knows that. John Swinney knows that. Keith Brown knows that. Keith Brown promised at the SNP conference a few weeks ago that there was a convention underway. To begin with, in his speech, he said it started today, and then he said, oh no, it's starting tomorrow. Well, tomorrow never comes in the eyes of the SNP and conventions, but what has got to be captured is the 20-odd% of people who are desperate to see independence, but are damned if they'll ever vote SNP again. And that's a combination of apathy and disappointment, and it has a lot to do with gender recognition reform. Yesterday, I spoke at the event that Women Won't Wheesht had organised in Edinburgh, and the hatred of certain people in the SNP was palpable because they just set their face against the absolute desire and the absolute right of women and girls to have single-sex spaces, protections and rights. And women won't wheesht, but women have long memories. And the SNP are not going to get the votes that they think they're going to get or they think they're entitled to. But if they want independence, which is supposed to be their raison d'etre, the way to do it is that convention, and it is to speak to people who are determined to deliver independence. And that includes Alan and me and Greg, who's obviously watching, and all the other activists who are watching too. We need to be positive about the potential outcomes for our country, and we need to have a spine and be able to argue back with those who say, oh no, you can't do that. And I include in that definition the Anna Sarwars of this world, who would be thrilled to the union forevermore and yet celebrate the independence days of so many other countries that broke away from the British Empire. What difference is there for Scotland? Are we the last outpost of the British Empire, or are we going to be the 66th country to depart the empire, hopefully next year?
We live in hope. We live in hope. But Eva's right, folks. But don't only just sit and watch shows like this and send your tweets and your Facebook posts. You need to get active. There's a platform there, but without helpers, without people joining in, it ain't going to happen. So you're going to have to get active. Lloyd, what all these polls show us is that there is, and we'll come on to it in detail in a minute in the next topic, but there's a huge and widening gap between those who support independence and those that will vote for the SNP. And it's not a circle that they can square, or they're refusing to square.
Yes, they could fix this very simply by recognising that next year's election is a plebiscite election. If they were to say, if the Scottish National Party, and you know, let's be generous here, if they were to say, vote for us in the constituency and vote for, or don't vote for us on the regional list, because to vote for the SNP in the regional list is effectively to open the door to non-independent supporting parties. That's just a fact. Now, is that likely to happen? I don't think so, unless there's enormous political and personal pressure put upon these people to get them to come to this realisation. Now, I've been in the SNP for a very long time, and this is the very first time, or the last few years have been the first times where I've seen the sure-footedness of SNP tactical application completely fail. Hence, you have this gap between the 30 to 32% who say they will vote for the SNP come hell or high water, and the 55 to 60% who support independence. Now, that's a near 30% gap. If you're a political strategist, what you want to do is you want to close that gap. You want those 30%, because if you are the party that says that they support independence, those 30% of the people that are not voting for you but are saying in opinion polls that they want independence, they are exactly the people you want to bring back into the fold. But I see nothing at all from the current SNP, either leadership or the strategists that they appear to have, to actually achieve that aim or achieve that goal. I think, in real terms, the 30% of the difference between support for the SNP and support for independence are those very people I was talking about earlier, who at the moment are apathetic, are completely apathetic, and are not coming out to vote, as we have seen very, very clearly in every council by-election and the few parliamentary by-elections we've had over the past couple of years. The people who are staying at home are the people who support independence but do not believe that the SNP is the means by which they deliver that, or that independence will be delivered. Now, in a circumstance like that, you have to say to yourself, is the SNP leadership position just stubbornness? Is it stupidity? Or is it something I've referred to over the past couple of years, which is the absolute managed decline of the party? And I have to say, sitting here today, looking at the opinion polls, seeing the result of the by-election, the council by-election that the SNP won during the week, I have to say, this is managed decline. There's no question in my mind that there are senior people in the leadership of the Scottish National Party who are prepared to see the party's power drawn down and minimised just for the sake of protecting themselves and their supporters. And it appears to me that the Scottish National Party has lost sight of its mission and has lost sight of the position in which it is held in the minds of most of the people of this country. Most of the people in this country, be they politically engaged or not, believe that the Scottish National Party stands for and means independence for Scotland. There are those of us who know better than that. But what I don't understand is, if the Scottish National Party genuinely want to win next year's election and win it well, why they are not reaching out to those who support independence. It's not sufficient for them periodically to say independence is our goal, if they don't lay out the means by which it can be delivered. And those of us who are, the anoraks in this circumstance, know very well that the circumstances that we are talking about of creating a plebiscite vote for independence in May of next year, at the time of the apportioned Scottish Parliament election, that could actually be done this week. It is possible for the Scottish National Party to collapse the Parliament and call an early election entirely and completely on the basis of a plebiscite. And they have the ability to do that because there is a nominally pro-independence majority in the Parliament at the moment, when you combine the votes of the Scottish National Party, the votes of the Green Party, and the one pro-independence independent. The majority is there. They could do this now. What I would like to know is what the explanation is from Keith Brown, from John Swinney, or from any of the so-called leadership of the Scottish National Party, is why they don't do that. If they are committed to independence, if they are saying, vote for us next year in May and we will deliver independence, though they haven't given us the route map for that, why is it that they don't just do it now? Because it can be done now. I think the answer to that lies in the previous comment I made, which is the current leadership of the Scottish National Party is in the process of managing the decline of the Scottish National Party, and by doing that, managing the decline of the national movement for independence. Unfortunately, as is clear from all the opinion polls over the past few years, the managed decline of the independence movement is not within the power of the Scottish National Party, because the power of the independence movement is separate from the Scottish National Party. And at the moment, it's 30% separate in terms of support for the Scottish National Party and support for independence. Now, in a circumstance like that, How can anybody come to the conclusion that my former boss, Factor John Swinney, you know, the Patrick Seller of the 21st century, that his commitment to independence is clear? How can it be? How can anyone analyse the current behaviour of the Scottish National Party, given the circumstances that I've just outlined, which is they could create the circumstances for a plebiscite vote tomorrow if they so desired to do it? Does it not make it absolutely patently obvious and clear that John Swinney's Scottish National Party is not in the business of creating national freedom, national liberation, or independence? They are not. They are in the business of maintaining the Union and maintaining a devolution structure which suits them individually and has genuinely, as we can clearly see from the lack of engagement by the mass of the voters in this country, that their failure to engage on the independence question is making the SNP decline and decline. And the only way out of it is for them to recommit themselves. But the only way there can be a recommitment to independence is if the membership of the party demand that of the leadership. And indeed, at their conference, there was an attempt to do that, which was completely torpedoed by John and the leadership. Now, those people who are dissatisfied within the SNP at the direction the party is taking need to take action. And if the action cannot be taken from within the party, then what they need to do is they need to commit themselves to support the broad alliance that is Liberate Scotland and give us independence, nothing less, independence, nothing more, in May of next year.
Well said. Just a quick, you probably saw in some of the comments we had a mad racist, which I blocked, and I've actually blocked someone else by mistake. The thing jumped at the wrong time. I will rectify that for Acorn. I apologise. But that's what happens. You do live shows, you get the racist and the bamstick sometimes turning up, but I wasn't having that, but mistake. Techie, can you stick up the Stirling by-election, Phil? This absolutely, brings it all up. Won by the SNP. It's hard to say it was being labelled as an SNP gain, but it's very difficult saying that in a 4-member ward. The point is two or three things in this. Their votes up, Labour's down, or saying, the same, Reform's up. But what happened? Turnout 26%, and an 18-year-old gets elected. It just shows that the unionists are cutting their own throats. There is it reaffirms that there is a chance for independence in May next year if the entire independence movement gets together.
In a four, you actually nailed it, a couple of real important points. In a 4-member ward, the narrowest of margins makes a difference. And why are the unions fighting amongst each other? Simple reason, because they know that the supposed independence movement is represented by currently the SNP and the Greens, and therefore they are safe from independence while they sort out the natural order of the unions. And that means Reform are going to wipe out Labour and Conservative in England, and they're going to try and make some inroads in Scotland, although they don't really care, because Scotland is just there to be raped and pillaged as it's always been for the last 300 plus years. So the unions can quite happily fight with each other without any fear of losing Scotland, because SNP and the Greens will not do that. They will just continue with devolution. So this, even in the Daily Mail, reports this quite accurately. The unionist vote split helps SNP win Stirling Council by election as John Swinney's losing streak comes to an end. Swinney stayed silent after his 8 previous by-election losses in a row, but was quick to celebrate the victory in Stirling when a child, more children's politics from SNP, was brought about due to a split in the pro-UK vote. The split in the unionist vote helped Swinney end up what was, let's face it, a brutal losing streak. And he's oversaw the 8 defeats, but it was the fact that all anti-nationalist voters decided to divide their votes between Scottish Labour, the Tories and Reform, which was the real reason for the SNP victory. A total of 57.4% of the vote went to UK parties. Remember that. 57.4% of the vote went to pro-UK parties, while the Nationalists secured victory on 36.6 is reported. So it's all aligned perfectly for delivering Scotland from the Union, because the Unionists are at each other's throat and the SNP are walking away from it. There was only 2,222 first preference votes cast. Remember, the SNP get 808, okay? The Tories get 147, Labour 150, Reform 550, Reform 517. We're talking hundreds and the narrowest of margins, where the Greens comes in at 141. So this is more clear proof, if MD needed it, that the SNP are traitors to the clause of independence. Quod erat demonstrandum. We need to punish them at the next election, and we cannot allow these shysters to continue to allow the prosecution and persecution of the people of Scotland, particularly those who are living under the poverty line. It's gone too far. We need action now, and that action has got to be to remove the SNP, change its leadership, put it back on track, and then, as part of a unified independence movement, give us our freedom. We're running out of time, and they are not for turning. So to hell with them.
Yeah. Techie, can you stick up? I mean, Labour continue with SNP bad, as do the Tories. That's all they've got, Alan. And I noticed this one coming up, the vote for Yvonne. Can you put that one up, Techie? This is the Labour candidate, and only Scottish Labour can defeat the SNP. Now, below that, I wrote to them and said, you're talking about beating the SNP. You're not talking about improving the lot of your constituents. You're not talking about, fixing potholes or fixing the schools or whatever. But it's all, vote for us to beat the SNP. SNP bad. That's all they've got. So when I reminded them of that, what happened 2 minutes later? Techie, can you put up the next one I got? What did Labour do? They blocked me because they don't want to hear the truth. And the fact, that's it. All they've got, if you look at all their things, they're going on about the billion just now. SNP bad, the ferries, don't forget the ferries. That's all they've got. They don't ever come in, Alan, and because they don't give a shit about Scotland to say, here's what we're going to do to improve your lot, this, and this, here's some policies. All they've got is SNP bad, independence bad.
This is why people of Scotland no longer trust any political party, because it's no longer a case of where you put your own policies forward and try to win support. What you do is you tell people how bad your opposition is, and you badmouth them all the way through the campaign, and nobody actually knows what you stand for. But we know what the Labour Party stands for. It stands for cutting pensions. It stands for cutting benefits. It stands for increasing taxation. And it stands for cutting services. But they don't want people to know that. And that's the biggest problem. And because of that, the winners in the elections is the apathy party. People not coming out to vote. I mean, 26% turnout. That's 3/4 of the voters looking at the ballot paper and saying, I don't want any of these to represent me. So they're not coming out to vote. And I mean, to claim this is a win for the SNP is disingenuous, because at the last election, at the proper council election, the SNP received 1,483 votes. The Tory party got 893. The Labour Party, 829. Reform didn't stand the last time. But what that represents in the by-election, with a very small turnout, is the SNP losing 675 votes. The Tory party losing 746 votes, Labour losing 299 votes, and Reform coming in at 517. Now, the interesting thing about that is the Tories lost more votes than what Reform got. And the SNP itself, so pro-independent support that didn't come out to vote, was higher than what the Reform vote was. And that is where we have to be campaigning. We have to have an alternative in every single seat throughout Scotland, so as we could pick up those independent supporters who are sick and tired of the SNP. Because let's face it, in 2021, I and many others voted SNP on the constituency and Alba on the list because I wanted independence. What did they get in return? No independence. Independence was shelved. And what we received was trans ideology and hate crime bills, which I have never, ever in my life supported. But they used my vote and other people's votes to get that through. That's not what we were loaning our votes for. We loaned our votes for one reason only, and that was for independence. They betrayed our trust, and we can no longer trust them again, because they have made it quite clear that if they are elected, they will not be declaring independence. They will be going cap in hand to Downing Street once again and asking Mr. Starmer, can we have another Section 30, please? Well, I'm sorry. Scotland bends the knee to no one. We are an independent country just waiting to break the chains. And that's what the SNP should be doing. And if they don't, the sma folk of Scotland will be changing their voting system in 2026. And they will be voting for the people who will take this battle to Westminster and tell them very clearly, we are an independent Scotland. Now get out of our country.
Well said, Alan. The clock's beating us. We're moving on as usual. Things, so I'll cram a few things. But Eva, Techie, can you stick up the news that came out this week about overnight ballot? The ballot for Holyrood is going to be left overnight and counted the next day. Now, I don't know about you, Eva. I don't trust the Brits an inch. I have my doubts about the election, the 2014 vote, and leaving ballots overnight makes me nervous. They might know something that we don't know yet.
Well, just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get me. I live in Clackmannanshire. I'm going to be paranoid. I'm going to be suspicious. I'll never live down being the first result in 2014. But can I just slightly rewind? John Hall in the comments is saying that we're not taking on Phil's point that the SNP are not an independence party. We very much are, John. That's why Alan is standing in Dundee for Liberate Scotland, Indy for Indy, and it's why I'm standing in Clackmannanshire and Dunblane against Keith Brown, and I'll be an independence candidate, and I'll be expecting to take that seat, because I don't believe that the SNP leadership are an independent supporting party, but I believe with all my heart that a lot of people who remain as members and supporters of the SNP do want independence. The problem is not the membership of the SNP, the problem is the leadership. So to jump on to counting the votes the day after the election, my bloody backside, that says it all. That tells you somebody's worried somewhere down the line, because they can see that next year's election has the potential, it has the capacity to be a plebiscite and to turn our worlds around and to turn Westminster upside down. Because next year the people could be, in essence, having a democratic velvet revolution by voting for Liberate Scotland or voting for Alba or the ISP or Sovereignty. All the people who want independence as an urgent priority. And you will find that that is the real reason for counting the votes the next day, because it gives an awful lot of time for people to have to be ultra and extra vigilant about who's looking after the boxes. Have they been properly sealed? Have they been unsealed? Equally vigilant or otherwise. There was lots of stories came out of 2014. They're not all the result of paranoia. So this is, from my perspective, very much a retrograde step, and somebody needs to petition the Scottish Parliament immediately to get it overturned, because, it's like justice. It has to be seen to be done. And the minute that you've got a perception that there's something dodgy, people lose faith in the process and they will lose faith in the results. And this election is so important that it's got to be squeaky clean and beyond all reproach and all suspicion.
Yeah. What about you, Lloyd? Are you comfortable that they're going to be leaving the ballot boxes somewhere overnight?
No, I'm not. But I think it's all part of something that's been going on for about 10, 15, 20 years now, about making elections less important in the minds of the people. You know, we've seen simple things like you're not allowed to put posters up on lampposts. You're not allowed to put posters in certain places. We used to have adverts on television on the run-up to election reminding people to go on and go out and vote. We don't have them anymore. We used to have radio adverts reminding people when the election was, on what particular day, at what particular times, instructing people how they could get a postal vote or what to do in the event of losing their polling card. All of this public information, which turned an election into something which engaged people, has been removed from the menu slowly but surely over the years. And the final part of that is, for a lot of people who are politically engaged, sitting up to watch the election results is the thing that people do. It's what makes it a bit special. It's kind of like Eurovision Song Contest for complete nerds like me. Now, all I see in this is a deliberate attempt to compress and create apathy. The result, if you actually look at the analysis of the results, the ones I've looked at are particularly for the Lothian region and for Edinburgh, where I live. Since the day and hour that the city council stopped putting out the public notices about elections and prevented people from putting posters up in public areas, the turnouts have reduced and reduced and reduced. And more importantly, if you actually look at it in terms of the council by-elections, particularly in the areas of what you would term of greater deprivation, the collapse in the voting numbers has been even greater, because an awful lot of people who live in areas of deprivation or who are suffering from deprivation, going out to vote is not the top of their list. And if they're not reminded that in actual fact that's what's coming, if you don't have campaigns in the run-up to elections to get people to go onto the electoral register, then what would be the natural, for anybody who's ever been in sales, right? This is like not telling people that you've got something to sell, yeah? What happens? Your number of customers reduces and reduces. I see in this, yes, the dark hands of the dark arts of politics, without a doubt. But what this really is, it's an assault on democracy, and it's a removal of our people's right to exercise their democratic rights. I want to see a return to politics and rather elections being an event. They were an event when I was a bairn. I mean, I can remember the first election that I didn't vote in. I was about 6 years old, but I remember that first election because there was a sense of an event happening in the streets. Cars going by with loudspeakers on them, posters up on the walls, people handing out badges and various things like that. It was an event, and it engaged people. Over the past 10 to 15 years, we have moved away from that. And I think, if we're honest, the real reason for that in our country, in Scotland, is because the greater the political understanding, the greater the political education of the people of this country, the greater the threat to the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and the greater the likelihood that £200 billion that gets taken out of our country each and every year will no longer be available to them on the banks of the Thames in the Palace of Westminster. So it's in their interest to drive down electoral engagement. And all I see in this is it's another attempt at driving down electoral engagement.
Yeah. For this next item, I mean, a great friend of this show, Craig Murray, I've got an utmost respect for. His, I remember sitting beside him at SNP conference. I remember, with ALBA meetings. But this week, Techie, could you stick up his tweet he's put out? He's joined your party, a British nationalist party, whether we like it or not. And Craig's saying how terrible it's enormous. The federal structure, England is assumed to be simply the main with the devolved structures of Scotland and Wales. He did say it was extremely Anglo-centric. By his own admission, Phil, he said it's extremely Anglo-centric, and yet he's gone and joined an extremely Anglo-centric party when he could have stood for ALPA, for Liberate Scotland, as an independent. It's just quite ridiculous.
Yes, and a wee bit disappointing to see. But then again, the question is, would Alapa put him forward? Is the first question. And also, again, like you, Roddy, I have a huge respect for Craig Murray, the man, the truth speaker, the who at his great expense for his own career, his own life, and in fact his very freedom, he stood against the British and the establishment. But he's also, I can't help but see, he's possibly got a point in supporting this. But of course, it's a calculation based probably on how best to make an impact in politics. And Craig feels that Jeremy Corbyn, who's a good man, has significant stock in politics, which he does, and is likely to go along with Scottish independence. There are indicators there because of his position on Palestine, his position on a united Ireland, and previously, I think he was when he was leader of Labour, he was kind of pushed into the corner to retain Scotland. I think he believes in the principle of Scottish freedom, but it's not high in his list of things to do or be, because he clearly sees that independence, that Scottish vote doesn't really make that much difference. What he needs is the English vote. So if pushed, it is a natural position of the left to have Scottish independence. There's no doubt that high-profile politicians like Jeremy Corbyn and George Galloway have a bigger pull than anyone within the Yes movement, since we sadly lost Alex Salmond's leadership so tragically. Only Nicola briefly held sway, but is now seen for what she is, a traitor to the people of Scotland. Then left-wing orientation does align with independence. What I would ask people to do is go see craigmurray.org, where Craig makes his statement, okay? And it explains it well. But for me, I would much rather we had him in our ranks, because I think he's a high-profile individual that people listen to for good reason. He's put his own neck on the line, and I guess he's doing this because he feels he's got a better chance of winning and changing things from the inside. So good luck to you, Craig, but I really don't think this is a party that has Scotland's best interests at heart. Good luck in changing it from within.
Yeah, if you couldn't change the SNP from within, which is supposed allegedly an independence party, how the heck are you going to turn a British metropolitan London-based party? Beats me. Alan, were you surprised when you heard this about Craig?
I was totally shocked. I mean, this is a man who's gone to the United Nations to fight Scotland's case as a colony, and then he joins a party from the colonising state. That doesn't look good. I mean, how can you say we want to be free from these people, but I'm going to stand for a party who is part of that system? It just doesn't make sense. It's like calling a ship unsafe, then going on a cruise on it. It's going to sink. There is no way you can change a party once it is part of the establishment. And unfortunately, your party was part of the establishment before it was set up. I mean, Corbyn has never, ever believed in independence for Scotland. He always believed that the British workers should unite and stay together. And that will never, ever change. Although he believes in independence for every other nation, just not Scotland. Because without Scotland, there is no way he can bring in the policies that he wants in England. And that is where our biggest problem is. I mean, Craig has now admitted that your party is not even an English-based party, but a London-centric party that is going to be looking after London. Who has been ripping off Scotland for the last over 300 years? London. That's who's been doing it. So Craig really has to consider his position, I think, as the UN envoy from Salvo. Absolutely. Because you cannot be in that position fighting Scotland's corner while you are representing a party who is part of the coloniser. So I would advise Craig to resign his position within your party and make it quite clear that he was not aware of how badly written their constitution was, being London-eccentric. Because, I mean, he thinks that he's going to be able to change them to have a Scottish arm. Well, Labour has a Scottish arm. Tories have a Scottish arm. Liberal Democrats have a Scottish arm. Unfortunately, it's on the unionist body. and that's what controls it.
Yeah.
So it's entirely up to Craig, but I've got to say, if you're not going to remove yourself from your party, I think you really should stand down and not be representing Scotland at any level.
I think that's the sort of feeling of us all here, Eva, but are we too purist? Us, are we too blinkered in our view?
Everybody here wants independence, nothing less, independence, nothing else. So do most of our viewers. So does clearly a majority of the people of Scotland now. And you quoted that opinion poll earlier saying that it was in the mid-50s. I don't believe that. I think it's in the low 60s. And I understand that there is private polling from one party to that effect. So, no, we're not purist. We just want the best for our country, and we put our country before party, and we put our country before the interests of any particular individual. And if Scotland were governed by politicians who had the mantra of country before party, we would soar. We would solve a housing crisis overnight practically. We would have an energy company practically overnight. We would be doing something concrete in terms of improving both the NHS and our education systems. We'd be dealing appropriately with difficulties that quite clearly exist in, for example, Police Scotland. We could do all of that if we reintroduced the competent government that Alex Salmond was so famous for. And, we need his likes now more than ever. And it remains such a tragedy that he's not here to lead the movement. But when you say, are we too purist? There's no such thing as being too purist when you're fighting for a principle. And the principle is self-determination for an ancient race. The Scots are a nation. We were a nation for 1,000 years before 1707. And we will be a nation again when we harness three things. One is the international recognition that is coming with the application to the UN. The second is popular support. And the third is the really hugely important democratic event. And that is why next year has to be a plebiscite. Because if John Swinney wins a majority of seats, he will not have a majority of the popular vote. The Liberate Scotland plan, to an extent the Alba plan, the notion of a plebiscite works on the premise that you have a majority of the popular vote and you have a majority of seats. And then you have international legitimacy and you have the legal right to declare the people have spoken, the strapline was independence, nothing less, and the people who voted overwhelmingly by way of the popular vote and the number of seats, and Scotland is entitled to its place between Saudi Arabia and Senegal at the UN. That can happen next year if every independence supporting activist does the job that they can do. Somebody once said, we each have a part to play, no matter how small, no matter how big. And every person watching this broadcast today has got a positive duty to do their best to deliver that plebiscite next year, deliver independence and start building the country Scotland's meant to be.
Yeah. I want to go overseas, if I may, for the end. The clock's beating us loud, but I'd like to play a video to you, and it's about from the Nobel Peace Prize winner. I want to stress that again. The winner of the Nobel Peace Prize. I think I know what peace means. Teki, can you play that video for me, please?
Do you support US military strikes on the territory of Venezuela as part of what you call a process?
I believe that the increase in pressure and the escalation that's taking place is the only way to force Maduro to understand that it's time to go.
Take it down, take it, stuck. The bottom, I stuck there. I don't know if the rest of you saw the whole video. I didn't. I got stuck halfway through. But the bottom line was the Nobel Peace Prize winner was asking the Americans to go and bomb our own country and kill our own. How's that peace? How does that get you a Nobel Peace Prize, Lloyd?
I think if I was Venezuelan, I would be a little less concerned about whether or not she was given a peace prize by an organization that created the concept of dynamite than I would be about the fact that she is a Venezuelan politician calling upon a third-party country to bomb the people of Venezuela. This person claims to be someone who has her country at heart. It would appear she would have her country at heart, but not its people. She would happily, like many of the right wing in South America over the length of my lifetime, who are prepared to sacrifice thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of their fellow countrymen just to stop them falling to what they termed communism or socialism in Chile, in Argentina, in Bolivia, in Peru, in Colombia, Brazil in 1966. All of these countries attacked from the outside by the Americans with the connivance of their own military. The one thing I would say about this particular person, though, is her statement that she made, that statement that we just listened to, resulted in the chiefs of staff of the Venezuelan armed forces going on television and stating very clearly that they considered her to be treasonous to the country, a traitor to the people of Venezuela, and that they recommitted themselves to the commitment that the Venezuelan armed forces have, which is the protection of the people first, the country second, and its natural resources third. That should be the mantra of every country in the world. That the first and primary directive of the armed forces or defense forces of any country is the protection of the people, not the political system, not the political parties, and certainly not traitors to their country like that woman is. It is beyond my understanding that anyone who claims the right to be the president of a country would be on international television advocating for the murder, death, and massacre of our own people. It's beyond understanding. It really is.
I mean, you know, it's not just in Scotland where you have people working for another country. It's happening everywhere. I'm sure you'll be the last one on this one, Phil, this comment, and we'll finish up. But I think it's just a coincidence that Venezuela has the largest oil deposits in the world. I'm sure the Americans are very sincere in what they're trying to do.
Yeah, this woman gets the Nobel Peace Prize for advocating war and invasion against their own people and their own country. What's going on? And straight, there's a couple of key points. The Western institutions, such as Nobel, World Health Organization, World Bank, EU, UN, are all corrupted. Well, the best hope for the planet Earth is the rise of BRICS, and Venezuela are lining up as part of BRICS. Venezuela has the largest known oil reserves in the world. I mean, we could stop it there, Roddy, as you've said as well. But for those that might want it spelled out just a little bit more, Maduro, the current democratically elected leader of Venezuela, is for the people. He wants to use the oil wealth, like Norway, for the benefit of the people. And the West doesn't like it because the West are controlled by the corporations, hedge funds, investment houses, big oil, who all want a cut on the world's natural resources, and this is prime for the taking. So why do we say that? Well, go on and read the Rand Corporation's paper on the website titled "Extending Russia." Okay, the one I talked about before, competing from an advantageous ground, published in 24th of April 2019. It shows the strategy that we're following: the proxy war in Ukraine, which is failing, to control over Ukraine's resources and hopefully get a hold of Russia's resources, which is completely self-sufficient. So the war against Russia and the greedy Western eyes on Russian oil and gas is failing. Israel's control over the Middle East oil is failing, is going to fail. The ultimate target for the West is to scupper China. Again, that will fail. That's a bridge too far. Jesus, the Houthis are a bridge too far. So what's left? The easy option of stealing Venezuela's oil. And that is why the US will invade. With 10,000 Marines currently offshore, a flotilla, a navy offshore. It's not an invasion force for occupation because it's not big enough. It's just about taking control of the country, which is done by replacing Maduro with this traitorous Machado, who, like Swinney, is a traitor to our country and our people. America should remember Vietnam. They lost to guerrilla warfare, and I applaud the military of Venezuela. They will fight for the people. They will revert to jungle warfare. And if America try to invade again, they will again be punished and they will lose in jungle warfare.
I mean, it's also pointless. I was talking to someone I know in Aberdeen, a guy called Sir Ian Wood, who said that the Venezuelan oil is going to run out in 2 years approximately. So the Americans are wasting their time. And I mean, this guy's in the know. He delivers the milk and the papers to the rigs. He knows all about oil. Anyway, that's the end of our first live show in a long while, folks. I don't know if you've enjoyed it. I'll find out in the comments, all the other comments later and everything else. We are leaving because I have another appointment at 2 o'clock, which is very pressing. And I hope whatever you're doing for the rest of the day, you have a joyous time, providing you're wearing a blue scarf. And until we see you all again, may you and yours, please take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.